a song for you.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and here we are already beginning Side B of Deep Purple and Rock. Here's the thing, though. Side A only has 3 songs. Albums were shorter back then, partially because of the amount of time you had available, but I feel like a lot of songs were shorter, and then you get to a song like Child in Time, which is over 10 minutes and is going to take up a lot of real estate on Side A, leaving only so much room for everything else. So, of course, you're going to get through them faster if you're looking at the song count, but we are far from done with this season because we have some bonus tracks. It's going to be a lot of fun. Today, we're talking about a really fun song called Flight of the Rat, and I'm going to read you the liner notes here. It says, just to remind you, there are other ways of turning on. I've heard this song a number of times in the course of my life. It's one that I've enjoyed very much, and I can only wonder what the hell that means, because it seems to me like the song is a bunch of stuff that happened. And maybe I'll feel differently after this listen, because again, this is the first time going through listening with a critical ear. And for those of you that are listening, if any of you have listened to any of these deep dive podcasts, whether, it's one on Deep Purple or one on any number of other bands where people really dig in and dissect the music, it's amazing what you hear sometimes that you never noticed in a song that you feel like you know backwards and forwards, because your focus is different. For one, I'm thinking about what I want to talk about when I stop a segment of the song. While I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, I want to mention something about this, or wow, that drum roll was interesting, I should talk about that sort of thing. But I'm also listening for things that I'm not used to listening for. We listen as casual listeners, and our focus is kind of on the whole song. Then there's certain things that will enhance the majority of your focus and blur everything else in the background. So say when the verse or chorus is going on, you're probably most likely going to be focused on vocals. Some of you will be focused on whatever the lead instrument is, be it guitar, keyboard, that sort of thing. And some people will just take that whole sound and blend it together as one thing and just listen to that. So that's the casual listener. The critical listener is like, wait a minute, why did the guitar just do that? What was that sound I just heard? Did it sound like somebody dropped a drumstick? Those are the kind of things that you start picking up on when you do it with a more critical ear. Now, you may hear some of those things as a casual listener, but you really start focusing in on that as a critical listener. So it can change your perception of a song. It can help you discover things in a song that you just did not know were there because you weren't paying. Not that you weren't paying attention to the song, but you weren't paying attention with that kind of focus. And there you end up with what you end up with. It's kind of it's been an interesting adventure. I remember thinking this with Uriah Heep a lot too, when I was doing the Magicians podcast. Even songs that I knew, I'm like, wait a minute, how did I never know that was in there before? I've heard the song 100 times at least. How is it possible I never noticed this one thing? Well, because A, I wasn't listening on the same technology I'm listening on now. I'm listening through studio monitor headphones. I might not have had the right volume level. I might not have had the right focus. The mix on a different version might have been different and buried something. There's a lot of factors, but in any case, I'm really excited as I go through these songs. I've loved picking up on little things that I never noticed before. Like how many songs are fading out and there's just a random kick drum from Ian Pace that feels like it finalizes the song. And sometimes it does. Sometimes everything just stops with that. And other times there's still like a, tail, reverb tail, note fading out tail, that kind of thing. So it's really been interesting to pick up on those little things that I never noticed before. There's some things I noticed the very first time I heard a song, like that little click at the end of Shadows, where it sounds like Ian Paice either dropped his drumstick or hit one against the other. And, it's like I always knew that was there. But as I'm focusing on the songs differently, I'm hearing a lot of other things that I never specifically noticed before, or maybe did and just forgot about. Heard it one time, thought, oh, that was kind of strange. I'll listen for that next time. And the next time comes around, I've completely forgotten about what I've heard. And I'm kind of starting from scratch again. So it's been a fascinating journey with Deep Purple as much as it was with Uriah Heep. I'm just, I guess, a little more surprised because I thought I knew all of these songs backwards and forwards with the exception of the concerto. It's cool, though. I like that I'm discovering things in songs that I felt really comfortable with. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen as we go through this song, Flight of the Rat. It's a good upbeat. There's I think some British elements in the lyrics that I might not really understand, and it might be preventing me from understanding what that summary was in the liner notes. I'm really not sure. But then I look at like John Lennon and some of the lyrics that he wrote that just seemed to be lines that came into his brain, and he just put them down and said, okay, there's your verse or there's your chorus. And we're like, what the hell are you talking about? How does he have monkey finger? What does that even mean? So I don't know. I'm really not sure I've ever had a real clue as to what this song is about, but I also don't care because it's just a fun song and I enjoy listening to it. So I say we dig right in. Here it is, Deep Purple, Flight of the Rat. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but in my left ear at the very beginning, it cut out slightly for just a second. You could still hear it in the right ear, but in the left ear, it cut out. Don't know why it would have done that. I can't think of anything intentional that would have caused that, or trying to think, through my audio engineer brain, why that would have happened. Maybe a short in the cable. I don't know. That just seems really weird. But in any case, starts off with a great riff, killer guitar sound. By the way, I don't really think I've talked about the sound that much on this album aside from the bass, but I love the way that Richie's guitar sounds on this. And then speaking of bass, that comes in very high in the mix, not high notation wise, but high volume wise. Really powerful, gritty bass. Absolutely love it. This is a cool opening. It just kind of, it tells me that I'm about to take a journey, which is what you really want a song to do. Now, I'm not going to dissect these lyrics, section by section here or anything, but I will say the starting lyrics, our entry point into the story of the song, is that basically there's an annoyance and it's leaving and everybody can be happy. So I don't know if that kind of relates to another way of turning on is by getting rid of things that you don't like in your life. But if that is the metaphor, it certainly is a good one. Take your finances, for example. You could say, okay, I need to make more money to cover my expenses. And that's a general mental attitude that we have in society. If I want to be happier financially, I need to bring more income into my life. You can look at it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are other ways of looking at it. Things like, for example, okay, but what do I have in my life that's costing me that I don't need? How about removing some expenses that are not necessarily that important to me, and then I wouldn't have to bring in as much money. So in other words, there's ways of bringing in more happiness, and there's ways of eliminating unhappiness that can bring you more happiness. And to me, that's where that first line puts us. And in conjunction to what they wrote in the liner notes, that kind of makes sense. Whether that was the meaning that they had, I have absolutely no idea. But here's another example of, we're going to do a very short intro. We're just going to set up, here's the feel of the song that you're about to dig into. Now we're going to start telling you the story. Very quick intro right into the song. I love it. Now, I don't know, because I wasn't there, and I haven't ever seen any history or documentation about this. There's very little that I've ever heard actually about these recording sessions, but I have to wonder if part of it wasn't just the tight restraint of how much you could fit on an album. We have X amount of time. We have to have at least, 7 songs. We can't really have 6. That's not going to feel like an album. 7's good for an album in, 1969, 1970, because you're getting away from the Motown thing where songs were like 2 to 4 minutes long. You could do longer tracks. You could dig in musically and really do something more as a band than just as like a pop group. So I have to wonder if some of it wasn't, hey, if we want to write a longer song, if we want to dig into solos and do trade-offs in these longer sections, we have to do a short intro. That's the only way we're going to make it work on an album. So I don't know if that was a consideration. If it was, it certainly would have been reasonable. I kind of like that section after the end of the lyrics there was just Richie doing that riff. I think it would have been a little overkill if everybody else joined in with him, because we've got all the instruments sound really heavy. And it's nice to be able to hear the dynamics of it, just hear how clean it is. And if you're adding the gritty organ, you're adding the really heavy bass, it really would have changed the way that part felt. So I like that it's just kind of, Ian saying his part of the story, here's what happened, and then Richie kind of tying that part up in this nice little bow, that Ian Pace coming in with this monster drum fill to lead us back together again. I love the dynamics of that. I think it's too easy as writers to make, and I'm talking about myself here too, because when I write, I'm writing for all the parts. So I think it's too easy to just have everybody duplicate or harmonize all the parts to make them sound thicker, to make them, more intense or whatever. But you need to know when to dial that back. You need to know when it needs to be clean and clear. And it's important to focus on what's being played. And the way that they did it really just brings out the clarity of the part. Holy crap, I never noticed in all the many times I've listened to this album, and there have been plenty, because this was an album that I got fairly early in my music collecting life. And I never heard that little kick pattern in there. That was really cool. I'm going to rewind a little bit and play that back for you. But I mean, it's really simple. It's not anything that necessarily would stand out, but it's with the heaviness of the bass drum on this album. And I love, I normally love a punchy kick. This is a little bit punchy, but it's just got more bottom end in it. And I really like that for this album. I think the way that the bass drum blends with the bass and the gritty organ works really well. But I never heard this extra kick drum in there before. That's really cool. Be careful what you touch. That is a great piece of advice. And I don't know where Ian actually got that line from, but it's really good advice. The advice that I would give is never put your tongue anywhere you're not willing to stick your finger first. love that harmonized guitar there. That's a cool part. I like the change there. I like Ian's voice, but he does seem, again, a little bit quiet in the mix on this one. It seems like whenever they add more effects, it kind of buries him in the mix a little bit. And as an audio engineer, I can say that makes perfect sense to me. I probably would have rather dialed back the effects a little bit and had his voice a little more prominent, because this is a storytelling type song. So, for most listeners, they're going to want to hear the story. It should be clear and easy to understand. And I feel a little bit of it's getting buried. But the guitar part's cool. I really like the harmony on this one. Again, we have like vocal section, then a guitar section, vocal section, then a guitar section. Not really a call and response, almost like yeah, I feel you, man. That's how it feels to me. But this last part with the harmony, now I'm not a guitar player, so I don't know how that was played. I don't know if that was the second track done as a harmony, or if there's a way to, play that on two strings and make it sound really smooth. But it was very clean, however he did it. Yeah, I'm going to go back and rewind and play that part again, but that's really cool. I love what Ian Paice played underneath that last line there. It wasn't, it wasn't inverting the beat. It just was like a nice little fill in, something a little bit different. It made it interesting. Ian Paice used to do a lot of that stuff back then. Nowadays, he plays a lot more straightforward. He still plays with energy and power, but he was very young, very adventurous, really carved a space out on his own in these songs back at this time. Okay, you guys know I'm not that big of a lyrics guy for a lot of my life, but yeah, he's kind of lost me at this point. I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. And I kind of go back to that John Lennon feeling where he's like, he's got monkey finger. Like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But what I do love is the sound of it. I love the sound of his voice. I love the intensity growing in the music, especially what Ian Paice is playing. I mean, he is just on fire in this song. And it's got such great energy. It just builds and builds. And I don't care what the story is about. I'm enjoying the sound of the vocals. I'm enjoying the sound of the song. And that, to me, is always the most important thing. What an explosive keyboard solo. I mean, the grit that we're hearing in the organ, turning on the beast, that distortion is just amazing and really brings so much power to the song, let alone just the fiery solo coming out of Jon Lord. It's almost like he'd just been waiting, like all this was just pent up in him and he just exploded, letting it all out. I love it. I would imagine that little extra bit of shine there at the very end of that killer solo was probably done with the whammy bar, I would imagine. Again, not a guitar player, so I don't know what other methods might have been available. But whatever it was, I'm sure the strings at the end of this song on Richie's guitar were like, oh, thank God that's over. Really just pushing the instrument to the limits. All these guys are, and that's what I love. This band is just really known for not holding back. And when you think back to your own childhood and what you like, the way you would do something back then as opposed to maybe the way that you would do it now. Even now, they're still playing with some pretty incredible fire. Having seen them twice live last year, I can say that they are just as good as ever. Yep, a couple different people in the band, but they are still on fire to these days and still giving it their all. The styles may have changed a little bit. The songwriting may have changed a little bit. I mean, this is just explosive, energetic youth right here. But that's to be expected. I mean, we all do that in life. We all change, we refine things, we find easier ways to do things. There's things that interest us more, some things that interest us less in the way that we develop different ideas or do things in life. So it's perfectly understandable that they wouldn't be this now, and I think they're doing great now. Obviously, topping charts all over the world with their newest album, Equals One. What can you say? These guys know how to make music that fans absolutely love. And this is one of those songs. I've said it before, there's one thing I love is musical chaos, and that does feel a bit chaotic to me. Going back and really listening to what Ian Paice is playing is really interesting because the kick placement, it's just fascinating to me. I'm not sure how he came up with that unless that was just the way he played it in the moment and that's what was captured and it was done maybe differently or more, it's a very spontaneous part. I feel like that's probably what it was. I feel like it was somewhat spontaneous. I want to say because I don't know for sure, again, not being a guitar player, but I think Richie's doing two different tracks. I think he's doing one that's very muted, just scratching back and forth across the strings. And then I think he's doing another track that's holding a little bit of, the sound of the notes a little bit better. That could be John Lord too, but I'm pretty sure it's Richie. But either way, a very cool and unexpected part. I love the way that after John Lord's solo, they did this. Okay, now we're all going to come together and then we're going to transition into the guitar segment of the song. And then this is just like, complete insanity as we head into, replaying basically the opening riff again. I like that they came back in with such a vengeance and they weren't perfectly on time. Again, I love when I hear that because it's just human beings playing music and captured in the moment, which I love. But also interesting is that there was no drum fill or anything in between the lines of the verse there. Just played very straightforward, but Roger is playing in a higher octave, sounds really good. You can hear John Lord cutting through a little bit in there as well, over in the left ear. Really, really cool, but the sound is just so thick, and I love that for a good heavy rock song. Okay, so this time we're getting more John Lord in this repeat of the section. And I feel more like I was right that it was Richie the first time that we were getting dual tracks from Richie. Again, I could be wrong, but that's what I'm hearing. But I love that sort of cut off organ sound like we got in Hush. It sounds really good in this song. I could make some argument that this song could be edited down had they needed to, or if they wanted to do a little bit longer of an opening. But I like the way they left it. But like a passage like this, there's not a lot going on that's new and fresh during the passage. For one, it's a repeat of the previous passage done a slightly different way, but there's no it's just like a straight part that's being played. There's no solo over it. There's no, directional focus for the audience to go to. So, I mean, if you wanted to take the song down, and I'm not saying I don't like it or that it should be removed, but if you did need to make some room on the album, again, just thinking about the time crunch, this is probably a section I would take out. Like I would go from where they stopped and then started up to go into that previous verse and then just gone into whatever comes after this. That's probably what I would do if a little time was needed. I'll tell you why I'm glad that they didn't make that edit, though. And again, I'm not an advocate saying that that should have happened, but I'm glad they didn't. And I'll tell you why, because the second stop or that first stop and start being heavier but more straightforward makes this one a lot more powerful. That whole fill that Ian Pace is doing there is a great build. It adds a lot of power to the song. And as they're about to close the song out, I mean, we basically got a minute and 18 seconds to go. I just think it makes the ending that much more powerful. That certainly would have made for a great concert ending. But what's interesting, out of curiosity, because I was thinking about it, and I thought, I don't think I've ever heard a live version of this song. Nothing from, like any of the early tapes from when they were, first touring this album, or, later on, like sometimes they'll revamp songs and just play them once in a while on stage. Like there's a short YouTube clip of them playing "I'm Alone" live, which was really cool. I'd love to hear that whole song. But I thought, I don't recall ever hearing a version of Flight of the Rats. So I went to trusty old setlist.fm. And according to the statistics there, which are not guaranteed to be 100% accurate, they've never played this song live. And I thought, what a missed opportunity, because this is a killer track. It might be tough to get through, but it is an absolutely killer track. And I would imagine this would translate to the stage very, very well. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we heard Ian Pace playing there at the end. This style of drumming, really, I mean, it's basically like a segment of a drum solo. And I say a segment because Ian Pace could go out in front of a crowd and play a 20-minute drum solo with everyone else off the stage and just him entertaining the crowd for 20 minutes, which nowadays is just unheard of. I mean, people just don't do that anymore. But this is basically what you would get in a live drum solo. It starts out with that build going back and forth from the snare and the toms and the kick, and you're not getting any cymbals in there, and it just builds and builds and gets faster and faster. And then you start alternating a little bit. I love the extra snare work he was putting in there, because that's something that you don't typically get. Just these little, little strings of snare notes in there I thought were fantastic. I've always loved that. Very hard to play. Well, I should say very hard to replicate. If you write it, it's very easy to play what you write. You develop it, you build it, you get comfortable with it, you know the dynamics of it, you know how to make it sound that way. When you take that and you're trying to copy it, it's very difficult to nail exactly what Ian Paice was playing, because that's not the common way that would be played, which is just part of Ian Paice's charm, of course, as a drummer. But I'm thinking of maybe the first time I heard that style of drum solo, which might be, and it's, just my 50 plus year old man recall, but it might be Rainbow live between the eyes, listening to Bobby Rondinelli's drum solo, which he played with his hands. He, shot the sticks off the cymbals into the crowd, started playing drums with the back of his hands, and started doing that type of thing. And speeding up until, he stopped. And then but he was also a double bass drummer. So he was carrying a lot of the weight on the double bass to take the pressure off of his hands. And of course, you're not able to do those, any kind of really good dynamics, because your hands don't bounce off of the heads like drumsticks do. Whether you're using a wood tip or a nylon tip, you just don't get that bounce, and you can't do buzz rolls and things like that the way you can with a drumstick. So it's certainly limiting, definitely more for show, but it still sounded good. I mean, what he played still sounded good, but it was not this level, because it couldn't possibly be playing with your hands. So that might be the first place I heard that style of playing and the speeding up and all that. But then he just went into like straight double bass drum thing leading up to the big gong hit, which, now these days I look at that solo as somewhat cheesy showmanship, as opposed to just a really good drum solo. And I know he's a good drummer. I've seen some of his clips of him playing at NAMM, and what he can do. He's definitely a very good drummer. But in any case, that's what we're getting out of Ian Paice here is a segment of a drum solo. Love the drama at the end, very similar to what we got at the end of Child in Time. I don't know what the Please Stay Away line is all about. That might have been one of those things that just in the moment Ian felt and he threw it in there. That goes back to, again, like why I could never be a great singer, because I can't just go with, I'm feeling this and just express it. As a musician, I might do that in a solo, but as a vocalist, I would probably, I can't think of a single instance that I've ever actually done that in a song when I used to sing my own songs. So kudos to that. It's somebody who's very comfortable doing what they're doing. But musicians do that all the time. I mean, drum fills are examples of that, little things that you might throw into a guitar solo, or a little extra thing that you might throw into a passive or riff. All kinds of things, like musicians are doing that kind of stuff all the time. But as a vocalist, I think I just feel more exposed, probably because I'm not comfortable as a vocalist. So that would be a big part of that. So kudos to Ian for saying, you know what, this needs to be in the song. This is what I'm feeling, and I'm throwing it in there. Very cool. Again, I've never heard any rough versions of this, no versions in development or anything. So I don't know if that was always there, if that was something that was just in that one time they recorded it or what, no idea. But at the end of the day, we are left with just a fantastic song. I would love to have seen what this would have been like had they played it live. And, as much as I'm not a big live music guy on recordings, I think this one would have been interesting to hear, just from the standpoint of the amount of energy that's in it. And the energy that they were playing with on stage too. I think it would have done very well, but that's just me. There must be some reason that they just didn't. And maybe, you only get so much time. And I remember when we saw Roger in Detroit last summer, he was talking about that, the difference between the two nights that we saw them. The second night was shorter, and that has to do with the regulations of the venue, where they're at, what hours the venue is allowed to perform, because you have restrictions for housing that's around the neighborhood of that concert that would be affected by what's going on. So, if you go too late into the night, now you're affecting these people and their ability to function. So there's restrictions when it comes to that. Obviously, the venue has to pay people, and the longer the concert goes, the more they have to pay them, because those are all hourly jobs. So, I mean, there's so much that goes into that kind of thing. So you have to plan your set list very carefully based on the allotted time that you have to be on stage. Then if there's delays, if if you're supposed to start at 8:30 and you don't start until 8:40, you don't get an extra 10 minutes to play. The end time is still the end time. So now you have to adjust your set for that. And we are talking a bit longer of a song. I mean, this is just shy of 8 minutes. So that might have been a big consideration as to why it wasn't performed live. They did plunder this album for material. I mean, I can't recall if they did it in Living Wreck or not, but I know they've done Into the Fire, Hard Lovin' Man, Speed King, Child in Time. So this album has been plundered extensively for live material. But I would say, not taking into consideration any of those other factors, I would say this would have been a really cool song to have seen performed live by these guys, especially back in 1970. So anyway, that is our episode for today, guys. I hope that you have a fantastic day. What is it? This is our fourth song. So it must be Friday. Let me double check that. Yes, it is Friday. So happy Friday to you guys. I hope you have a great weekend. And you know what? While I still have a voice, I thought I'd do something that I've meant to do for a while. If you guys want to tune out and not listen to the technical side of what goes on in this podcast, that's fine. We've covered the song, and that's really all I'm going to say about it. But for those of you who are interested, I do record this all obviously in my home studio that I've had for many, many years. I am recording through Cakewalk by BandLab. I have been with Cakewalk since they were owned by 12 Tone Systems back in the 90s. They have been my DAW or digital audio workstation of choice. There was a time where I did try working with some other DAWs back when I was moving to LA to do work as a film composer. And I heard a lot of talk about how different filmmakers prefer you work in Pro Tools, or they prefer this or prefer that. I'm like, I don't know why anyone gives a shit what you work in, because you're just delivering the product. And as long as the product is fine, who cares? But I know that there was some people that were just like, I want you working in Pro Tools because that's the industry standard, and all this bullshit that went with it, which is part of why I hated my experience out there so much. But what I did is I went out and bought all of them. I bought Digital Performer, I bought Ableton, I bought Pro Tools, and all these things. And I never really learned them. I just had them available to me. I did learn a little bit about Digital Performer. It was the most comfortable for me to work in. Ableton, I could never really get a grip on. So I recorded Cakewalk by BandLab. Thanks to BandLab for acquiring this from the disaster that Gibson turned it into, and keeping this DAW alive. If I had to, I would just learn another DAW. I'd probably go with Digital Performer. It's very nice. I really love that. I love Mark of the Unicorn, or Motu as they are known now. And that is who makes it. I actually use the Motu M4 audio interface to plug my microphone into and to monitor through. That is actually it used to be a digital audio card back when it was like a card you put in the computer, and now it's more of a breakout box. And I use that for everything. That is how I listen to everything on my computer, whether I'm listening to music or watching something on Netflix, recording a podcast, anything. That is my audio interface. And I absolutely love it. In fact, when I first got up and running, I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but I was having an issue with something or other. I think it might have been after a Windows update. And I reached out to Motu, to their technical assistants, and those guys were absolutely incredible. I don't know how many emails we went back and forth with, and they were just fantastic, going, try this. And finally we got things to work. And they were just absolutely some of the best customer service I've ever had. And so should the day ever come where I want to upgrade, I will definitely look at Mark of the Unicorn as my first choice of replacement sound cards. I'd worked with MIDI Man, which turned into M Audio for the longest time. And when it came time to upgrade, just because the card I had was old, and the technology was advancing. I had been to the Motu booth at NAMM a few times and thought, they're really cool. They've got good stuff. I like Digital Performer, and decided to check out this audio interface at the NAMM show. Really liked it, and then when it came time, I went ahead and purchased it. Now my microphone. This is interesting because this microphone has got to be 25 years old now, I want to say. Somewhere around there. Longer than that. Let's see. When did I leave Colorado? It was in 2001. But I can't remember. I think it was when I left in 98. The first time before I moved to Arizona. I think that's when I purchased this microphone. So this is an Audio Technica AT 2020, I think. And I'm going to double check that. Oh, nope, 3035. Sorry, AT 3035 recording mic. This has is not a USB. It actually has the 3-prong XLR cable, goes right into the Motu M4, and it's done nothing but give me a wonderful sound and experience over all these years. So there's really no reason for me to switch that out. I was curious to try that newer. It's been out for a couple years now. But that Shure microphone that's designed for podcasts. But you know what? I'm getting such a great sound with this one. Why would I bother doing that? I mean, how much better can the sound possibly get? It's crystal clear. But part of the reason for that is because I use Audionamics IDC, or Instant Dialogue Cleaner, one of the most brilliant pieces of gear that I have in my studio. I set the dial to -10. And it takes out any of that background noise for the most part. And it's funny, I mean, living right next to the Vegas airport, as far as I know, a plane was never heard on any of my podcasts. And the airport was right across the street. I would wake up, 6 a.m., there's planes taking off. And because the runways were on the street side of the airport. So very loud, but it cleaned everything up very well. Dogs barking, kids playing outside, took it all out. Very incredible piece of gear. Also, sometimes for some reason, I've never understood what the difference is, because I always do a clean boot before I start recording a podcast, whether it's my own podcast I'm recording or I'm a guest on someone else's podcast. And sometimes there's a lot of crackle in the recording. I don't know what causes that. Most of the time it's fairly clean. As I'm recording this one, there's a lot of crackle in it, but I will run that through iZotope RX to a D-Click, and it takes all that out for me in one pass. Very, very simple. And there's also a couple of Waves products that I use. One of them is Leveler. It's basically what it does is it just kind of levels out the volume a little bit so that it's a Vocal Writer, and I use the mono version because I'm recording in mono, and that just kind of smooths out the volume of my voice a little bit. Not 100% exactly to be the same, which is fine. I mean, you want it to be a little human, but just kind of smooths out the overall volume a little bit. And then I also use Sibilance, which takes out some of the S sounds in there, and then Waves Deep Breath as well. And then there's one other plugin that I use on top of that, and that is it came with the original Cakewalk, and can't remember if it came with the original or if it was in the bonus FX disc. But is the Sonatus FX compressor, which I use on the voice again, just to kind of help level things out a little bit. Between all those plugins and all that, the whole thing comes out great. And then just the dialogue track alone, whether it's by myself or with a guest, but without any of the music, I run the whole thing through a program called Levelator, which is a very simple, you just take that final waveform, drop it on the Levelator icon on the desktop. It runs its process. It puts the output file back in the same folder it came from. And that takes everything to the production level volume. So it's sort of like a final mastering peak limiter, I guess you would say. But all this stuff is really hands off. It's just set and hit go, and it does its thing. But I can tell you the background processes for some of these things. I remember talking to Audionamics, to Ellie at Audionamics about all the processes that go on behind the scenes in Instant Dialogue Cleaner, and it's just insane because it's got a lot of stuff it's trying to detect. It's trying to determine what to keep, what to get rid of, how to get rid of it, and then actually get rid of it. That's a lot of stuff to put on a program because it's all random sounds, so it has to figure out what you want and what you don't want and then just do it. And it's always worked just beautifully for me. And then I export, I bring that into the session and then export that with the music. Then I have had problems in the past where sometimes, and I still don't know how this happens, but sometimes things get messed up in the export. And so what I'm doing now is before I upload it, I'm bringing that export back into the session, giving it a once over before I export it. And since I started doing that, I have not had any problems with anything. And I haven't caught anything that's gone wrong. So it's good that it's exporting fine, but I'd still like to know, what causes all that. But in any case, the last step then for me is to take that beautiful logo that Scott Lazinski designed for me and put that into Camtasia, where I put the audio file into the system as well. And then I stretch out the picture to the entire length of the podcast. And then I export that as a movie that I then upload to the YouTube version, because YouTube doesn't just accept an audio file, it's a visual format. So they need something there. And since there is a little bit of editing that goes on, just basically taking the song and squishing down the space so that you guys aren't listening to blank space. Other than that, very little editing goes on. Any other thing, like if I mess up something and want to re-record it, I just do that on the fly. But that wouldn't really work for video. So it's just an audio podcast. And that's that. Then I upload that and it's all done. I upload the audio only version to Acast, which is my distributor, and they send it out to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and Apple or Amazon and all those wonderful places, Spotify, that you guys are listening to through your podcast app. And that's it. And then I just make the announcements. But big shout out to Scott Lazinski, who did an amazing job in a very quick turnaround time for the logo. He did the logo for Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'm beta reading his book series. Go check him out. The link is on my website to his stuff. And what an amazing artist. I've known him since high school. So anyway, that's how the podcast comes together in a nutshell, guys. If I do have a guest on, I record that live through Cakewalk, and then I have the Zoom recording as a backup. And again, just the audio feed, but it records the individual tracks, which is important because if I record the guest, their track merges with the music audio that comes through. So I actually have to go in and cut those sections out and then re-record the music over those sections because it's blended together into one track. So if they make a noise, if they put a coffee cup down, if they say anything, if any of that, I can't unbreak that. So the beauty of Zoom is that it records the music on a separate track in stereo. So I can actually use that track for the music and then just chop out the bits of it during their track. And then we get a clean, smooth presentation for the final recording. So also those episodes tend to be a lot longer. So it takes longer for every single component to render. So when I have a guest on, those are a little bit more to produce. But I think they're great episodes too. So far, all of the guests that I've had on, which has been Corey Morissette, John Matola, and Mark Roback, they've all been fantastic episodes that I've enjoyed very much. Got plenty of guests coming up, scheduled or on the list. People who I know who have chosen certain songs that asked to be part of those episodes, and we'll get to them as they come up, since I'm doing everything in chronological order. So anyway, that is my long-winded explanation of the technical background of the podcast. If you guys have listened to that, thank you for appreciating all the work that goes into it. If you'd like to support the podcast and all that work, please go to the Patreon account. It is in the show notes, the link right there. You can click on that. You can sign up for $1, $5, whatever you like. I think there's a thing that you can put in your own tier. If there's not a way to do that and you want to donate a different amount, reach out to me and I'm happy to start that for you. But thanks to those who have. Corey Morissette, appreciate you very much. And of course, William Rose, great guy. Had some wonderful conversations with him over the last few years through the Deep Purple podcast, the Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast, all of those. Go check out Nate and John at the Deep Purple podcast. Excellent show on Deep Purple. They've covered I think the entire Deep Purple catalog now. Gotten through all those. They've gone into, they've always broken those up by doing extended family albums. Tommy Bolin, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, you name it. They've covered it. They've done live concerts, all kinds of stuff. And then we have some fun episodes like the Deep Purple Game Show, the What If episode, which I think was I think the What If episode was the first one I was on, if I remember right. It was either that or the Deep Purple Game Show. I can't remember now, but lots of fun. The shows are always great. Those guys could talk about anything. It doesn't even have to be Deep Purple, and I would enjoy listening to them, but it's always great when they tie it into some subject matter that I'm familiar with. And they've had a lot of great episodes along the way. So looking forward to more of them every week. Go check them out in the same podcast player that you're hearing this. They are sure to be as well. The Deep Purple Podcast. You guys have a great weekend. I don't know if I have anything going on Haskincast this particular weekend or not. Let's see. When this airs, we'll not have hit the 500th episode yet, or maybe we'll have it, or it will be very, very close. I think it's going to be around end of April, if I'm not mistaken. And we are looking at, where are we? Like early April when this airs. So still shouldn't have happened yet, but great stuff coming up every week, every Wednesday, and then some bonus episodes with reviews that I do for Cherry Red Records. Sometimes interviews have to be released on certain dates, so those just get released on whatever date the publicist tells me they need to be released on. And then sometimes I've got a Wednesday episode and I get an interview that I want to release before the next Wednesday episode, so oftentimes I'll do those on Saturday. You can keep up with both of those shows in your favorite podcast player. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for listening.